this what I want to be in?
Go back to the
I think
beginning.
so.
I have contacts that aren't working anywhere yet either.
Where do we want to
Yeah, I
go?
knew
Help
that,
me.
but they've committed a crime, or at least
The
it's
City of New Ulm one.
Meetings?
Human Rights Commission
Today's meeting, Human Rights Commission here over on the right.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Monday, July 22nd, 2019 Human Rights Commission. It's 5:15. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna like to approve the minutes from May 22nd, 2019, as we did not have a meeting in June. Has everybody had a chance to look at the May minutes? Any questions or additions that anyone would like to add? Can I get a motion to approve the May meeting minutes?
I move to approve.
Please. Second.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that is approved. And also the agenda for tonight's meeting, has everyone had a chance to look it over? Are there anything that needs to be added or changed or moved?
Nope.
Were we going to move number 7 to the
We are.
beginning?
Yep, the current human rights issue, number 7, we'll move that right up after we approve the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. So we'd like to move right up to number 7.2. Police Chief Dave Borkert, if you could come up to the podium, please.
Thank you for inviting me. Mr. President, members of the commission, I'm Dave Borkert, the police chief for the city of New Ulm. So just to maybe get started here, just to start the conversation, I had gotten a request from one of the commissioners regarding what the practices are like when we're talking about like undocumented immigrants and residents, and what the practice are as far as working with ICE. ICE, of course, is the federal law enforcement agency that oversees undocumented immigrants and residents. So as far as our practice, now this has been in place certainly as long as I'm aware of. I go back with this agency 20 years ago, and that's certainly been in place. I'm going to say, as far as I know, indefinite, but again, things have changed around a lot within the last, probably the last 7 years, 5 years. But the practices that change, there hasn't really been any changes. So just talking about, ICE is a legitimate law enforcement agency. So as far as, how the New Ulm Police Department, and I'm going to say practices Minnesota law enforcement wide, is that we work with other law enforcement agencies. This includes assisting them when they make requests of us. Also, as far as the New Ulm Police Department, personally, my interaction has been with them. They're a law enforcement agency. They're a federal agency. So there's some they have much larger jurisdiction, certainly, than the city of New Ulm has. So a lot of the cases that I've worked with them on, or I'm just going to say the primary case that I worked with them on is when I was a criminal investigator a number of years ago. We had a child pornography case, and the individual had possession of child pornography, and we basically, as far as a lot of the actors that were involved in this, they were basically forced to participate in it. It certainly went over our jurisdictional boundaries. So that was where I had firsthand experience working with them. That's probably the most extensive experience I've had with them personally, because again, we don't work with them a lot. And in that case, we were able to get partnered up with one of the federal agents, and we were able to certainly cross state boundaries, and also actually in other countries. They basically have like what we refer to as SOFA agreements. Basically jurisdictional agreements with other countries, and that's where I had worked with them probably the most extensive. As far as local practice, just to kind of maybe get the conversation, because I think right now, there's probably a lot more focus on what's going on right now, not something that happened 12 years ago. But if we come across an individual through, you know, our responsibility as law enforcement, and we believe that the individual is undocumented, what we basically do is we're routing reports to ICE. And then we don't take individuals in custody if we believe that they're undocumented, unless there's another crime that we're investigating that's involved. So if we're investigating an armed robbery, now again, I'm not saying undocumented residents are committing armed robberies, but let's just say, for sake of an example, we're investigating a crime where we would take someone into custody. We may take that person into custody, obviously, but we will not for just them being undocumented. Sure. Or our suspicion that they're undocumented. And then as far as holds, we're allowed to hold someone. It's called 36 and a 48-hour rule, but essentially let's just say, for all practical purposes, we as law enforcement officials can't hold anybody longer than 48 hours unless it's signed off by a judge. Then at that point, the holds go further than that. Number of years, well, approximately 2.5 years ago, there was a request from the federal government, primarily ICE, that we hold individuals longer than that 48 hours. I don't know if you recall that. And the Minnesota Sheriff's Association got involved in that because as far as, holding people, we have a jail here, but it's not in no shape, way, or form controlled by the New Ulm Police Department, by the city of New Ulm. It's controlled by the county. So the county sheriff, of course, they're the ones that oversee that. And the Sheriff's Association, which would be the appropriate association to address that, did. And they basically came back that said, we won't hold anybody longer than the 48 hours. There's no special exceptions because you're a federal agency. It has to be signed off by a federal judge, or it has to be signed off by a judge or a magistrate. And certainly a federal magistrate would qualify for that if they've been able to have something signed off by that magistrate. But just because again, ICE agents, they're law enforcement agents, they're federal law enforcement agents, but they don't have any more authority from that standpoint to hold someone. That takes a judge or a magistrate. So that's basically the practice right now. Again, this was meant to kind of get the ball rolling. If there's some additional questions or something like that, I'll be certainly happy to try to answer the questions to the best of my ability.
I have a question.
Sure.
What do you consider causing suspicion? Is there specific criteria that have to be met to be considered a suspected undocumented immigrant, or is it all based on officers' discretion?
Well, I can't think of ever having a case where, we're pulling someone over because we think that they're not. I can't think of a scenario where we're going to think that they're undocumented and initiate contact with that. Generally, it's when, like, for example, if the officer is doing a DWI arrest and the suspect, or maybe even some individuals in that car that we're coming across through the course of our responsibility, we believe that they're undocumented, sometimes because they've shared that with us. Even in that case, we don't take them into custody for just that offense alone. So let's just say, for sake of example, trying to answer your question to the best of my ability, if we arrest someone for a DWI, and let's just say that a passenger in there that we've identified shares with us that they're undocumented, and again, I can think of examples of that where firsthand where that happens. In a case like that, we're not taking them into custody because they're undocumented. However, we're going to share that information to the best of our ability with ICE, and that's basically just a routing report. We forward it by email electronically to ICE, and a lot of times that's kind of the last we hear about it, what their process is. Again, I think it needs to meet a certain criteria, is my understanding. They have to have a certain amount of individuals. They're not going to, unless there's something violent, they're not going to come to New Ulm for one person. Does that answer your question?
Partially, yeah. But if they don't tell you their status, what else would you consider suspect that would make you think that they?
If they give us like what we consider a false ID, and they're pretty easy. Well, I'm not. It's gotten more sophisticated now. But like for example, and this comes up with law enforcement agency training, and this goes. I'm going to say this goes back over 20 years ago because I remember I used to work in western Minnesota, so I encountered this probably more often than even what we see here now because we don't encounter it much around New Ulm. We just don't. But I worked in western Minnesota, and just because of a lot of the industry that we had out there, we encountered it a lot more as far as meaning law enforcement. And so I had probably quite a bit more detailed training regarding that because just by our involvement with it. So like, let's just say someone hands me an ID card and I'm like, that doesn't look legitimate, or I find some error in it. I'm not even allowed to seize it. Mm-hmm. But what I can do is I can certainly take that information and share it with ICE. Mm-hmm. And that was the practice, I'm going to say 25 years ago when I was encountering that. That's the practice today. In New Ulm, I mean, it doesn't happen often, but so it's usually like when we're coming across, again, through normal course of business.
Is there due process before that report is funneled to ICE? I don't know
what you're referring. I mean, as far as due process, I mean, I think of that where we're going in front of a judge. Mm-hmm. We're not taking someone, we're not holding someone indefinitely or past what the legal limits are. As far as routing reports, I don't put that in that same category. We're simply sharing information with another law enforcement agency.
What about personal property? If they say the undocumented immigrants are detained by ICE and they have a child that is a citizen, what happens to the personal property of those individuals?
Every case is going to be a little bit different. I can think of a bunch of scenarios, but for example, if we would have someone that we take if ICE would take someone in custody, and again, I can't think firsthand of an experience. We've certainly had them in town taking care of those issues, but again, if you've ever dealt with the federal agencies, they appear to have a lot more resources than we do locally. It's almost like, it seems like, watching TV cops or something because they have a lot more resources. So I can't think of a scenario where they asked for our resources. However, let's just say, I'm just going to try to answer your question as far as a legal process that we would be involved in. If they took someone into custody, ICE would, and let's just say they left some children behind. And I imagine that's kind of what you're...
Yep. Correct, if they have to go into the foster system or something.
And that's exactly what we would be doing. We would be contacting, so we'd have the same routing process, and our officers would be contacting Child Protection. Now, Child Protection's county. It's not city, and it's not the feds. It's county service, county resource. So we'd be contacting the county on that. They're the ones, there would be the subject matter experts that we'd be dealing with. And then, I'm not going to speak for the county, but we work with them enough what I will say from my observations, what they try to do is they try to find a family member or someone close to that individual. So let's just say the husband was taken and the wife is behind, or someone, the other parent's behind. They would certainly make arrangements, from my experience, because they try not to put the individual, the child, with a stranger. If they can't find anybody available, and you can imagine, especially if there's situations where they think, we're all undocumented, they're fearing that they're going to get possibly taken into custody or something like that, even perception. Then they would go through the normal resources that they have available, and they have individuals that serve as temporary foster parents.
Sure. I have one last question. Sorry, everybody.
It's all right.
If for some reason, in the case that ICE would request assistance from the police department here, do you require seeing their signed detainer or warrant for the assistance with them to go and remove that person from the home?
I'm going to say yes. I mean, I can think of only a scenario as if you had something, let's say they're involved with something and all of a sudden things really blow up. There's gunfire. I mean, we're not going to ask to see everything beforehand. Those are exigent circumstances that we're going to respond. From my experience from working with them, they'll come into town. They'll come in during day hours or maybe the day before even, and they'll say, you know, I'm agent so-and-so, I'm the supervising agent regarding this operation, and that's pretty much how they talk. And then they'll, you know, we'll credential them. We'll make sure that they're actually from that agency. We'll make our calls, that kind of thing. And then they generally, if they have an order, they're sharing that with us. And from my experience, we'll always ask, because they're a law enforcement agency, we will assist them. There's no question. There's, you know, no question we're going to assist them in every way reasonable. But when we've asked, they're generally like, we're going to just be at such and such a location at such and such a time. So if you get a call, likely it's us. This is my cell phone number. This is my contact information. This is a back contact information. So they provide all of that. So we do this a lot of times with deconfliction, because we don't, law enforcement in general, and if anything, I think we've gotten better even at the state level, local and state level with that. We never want to come across other cops and not know they're cops, because it's
Dangerous.
it's dangerous. Probably someone's going to get hurt in a situation like that. And I can, you know, firsthand, I can think of experiences that we've had regarding that. Normally, a lot of that stuff involves narcotics, like narcotic investigations, because people are undercover. You're not running around with uniforms on. Your vehicles are undercover. And now you have someone else that's following a vehicle, and you don't know that that's a law enforcement agent. And again, things blow up. So we have resources available at the state level, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA level, where now the best practices where we're always sharing the information. We're running an operation on this vehicle at this location. This is the contact, same kind of thing, so that we're trying to avoid any of those type of situations from happening. And it's been very successful. The feds have been doing that for decades, where they're like, you know, we don't want anybody to think we're doing a kidnapping here, and, you know, we end up getting into a violent situation, a violent encounter. So they're sharing that information well in advance. And, you know, when we ask them, do you want any assistance from us, you know, whatever we can have, we'll certainly try to reasonably provide. Generally, the question, you know, the response is no, thank you. We'll just letting you know we're here, and we'll let you know when we're done. And then when they're, you know, leaving town, and that's generally what it is, they're literally leaving town. The operations, from my experience, don't take long. And then they'll share with us, and a lot of times they'll even stop by that lead agent, because that person's more of an administrator. And then they'll share that they're everything went well, or they'll kind of give us a little bit of an update, and off they go.
Thank you.
You bet. Are you seeing, are you seeing any questions from the general public regarding any?
No. You know, I think a lot of it's because we don't, in City of Nome, we just don't have a whole lot of encounters. I think we potentially could. You know, if we had those encounters, we're just currently not seeing them.
Okay.
So the answer to that is no, we're not.
No calls from citizens saying they suspect a neighbor, nothing like that?
No,
That's good to hear.
nothing.
That's okay, that was gonna be my question, is how often do you feel like you do need to contact ICE through your department?
It's not, you know, generally it's the stuff that we're seeing, it's where we're doing a traffic stop. It's usually a traffic stop. I mean, if you're going to ask for the majority of the time, it's a traffic stop. We stop someone for speeding or stop sign or something like that. And then during that encounter, we figure out that someone we believe is undocumented. And then it's a routing report the next business day that gets sent. And again, what they do with it, at that point, I don't know.
But how often does something like that occur? Like, is that a pretty rare?
Pretty rare.
Okay.
kind of a follow-up to that, Chief, and thanks for being here. It's kind of getting back to Jackie's due process question. So going back to your example of like a burglary, okay, so you're investigating, and let's just say you make an arrest based on probable cause for burglary, right?
Yes.
So is there criteria then that the officers use independent of ethnicity or origin to make to determine that this person may not be documented? So, for example, you indicated before something like a lot of times if a name or a photograph doesn't match the person who gave it to you, is there other things like out-of-state addresses, or perhaps other things like a social security number that doesn't look exactly real? And then what steps do they take to essentially kind of ferret that out, so to speak, so they see, okay, this address really does exist, but it's in a different state? And then a follow-up to that is the officer then do the report, or is that filed up through a corporal or a sergeant? Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, you gave the example of a burglary. I'm picturing a burglary in process, okay, in progress, right? So let's just say we pull up to a burglary. There's 4 people standing outside the house, and we see one person running out of it. Depending on I'm kind of making up a story right now, but how we a lot of times see the burglaries in progress. Someone's running out of a house. In a case like that, we're identifying everybody because we believe everybody might be involved with that situation to some level. We have to try to figure out their involvement. Let's just say through that process. Okay, so that's kind of the stage, and that's how we would investigate any, as far as criminal procedures, that's how we'd investigate any situation like that. Let's say through the process, we come across an individual that we believe is undocumented. Now that could be because when we're asking for them to identify themselves, they share some form, some card or something like that, identification form that we don't consider legitimate. Okay, that would be an example. We wouldn't be taking someone into custody for something like that. In fact, we wouldn't even be seizing that card or whatever the form of ID is. Now, we may take the person in custody if we believe that, if we just saw them run out of the house and the homeowner says, no, they don't live here, and it's a burglary, there's a crime that took place other than trespass, they're inside that house. That would be what I consider, or all of us consider, a arrestable offense. We'd actually take someone into custody for that. So in a case like that, now we have the individual in custody. When we do our routing report, we have the person sitting in jail for this offense, and there's they might have some time involved because there's gonna be bail, potentially, and that's gonna be up to the judge, but they look at the flight risk, the risk to a society. There's factors. Again, I'm not speaking for the judge, but that person may be in jail for a while. They may be in custody for a while. But again, it's not because of the immigration status. We're not qualified to make that determination. Now, I'll just give you another example. Let's say you have the individual that's standing there more like a witness. We go through the process. Same deal. We ask for some ID. We don't figure out who they are. We believe that they're undocumented. Okay, in a case like that, we would not be taking them into custody unless we had something to take them into custody for. And it's, it can't be creative thinking, or creative writing. It has to be where we really would take someone into custody. Again, for burglary of an occupied residence, of course we would. They'd have to explain why they didn't do it to me, if they let someone run out of a house like that. But yeah, if that helps answer your question. Now, as far as the routing, the second part of that question was the routing process?
yeah, just like, for example, let's just say it's a traffic stop and gives some sort of identification that the officer or the New Ulm Police Department doesn't consider legitimate, and then they want to route that incident for whatever reason. Does that does just the officer, does each officer have that ability to route it, or does that go up through a sergeant and then it's routed, or how does that work?
Well, the reporting, the routing process, and that's with all of our routing forms that we have, our routing reports. We just basically in the bottom have a box that says, where do you want it routed to? It's right on the bottom of every report that we have. And then if we put down human services, child protection in parentheses, human services, adult mental health, ICE, we would check that. And then that report gets, so as far as the oversight, the shift supervisor, so usually a sergeant, reviews that report and says, yep, that looks right. That's who I would route it to. Or they may say, you know what, they forgot one. I'd like them to also consider that. And they're going to share that with the officer, but realistically, they wouldn't have to. They're the supervisor, and they might check another box, or they might take one off because they're like, no, that's not appropriate to go to child protection. It has nothing to do with children or something. It should go to human services, adult protection, or maybe another one if there's some error that they detect. So yeah, there's the oversight as far as the sergeant.
Okay.
Let's put me in the burglary situation where I'm the one running out of the house, and I give you the same type of false or seemingly false documentation. Is all of my information also sent to ICE as suspected undocumented immigrant?
If we suspected you of being an undocumented immigrant, yes.
Okay.
A lot of times, a lot of the stuff that we come across, like, it could be any language, but a lot of times we'll hear people chattering between each other. We're standing right there, a lot of times in a full uniform. Well, we have 2 officers that speak Spanish fluently. They don't look like they, what a lot of people would say, they wouldn't think that they're not suspecting them of being able to speak Spanish, so they're overhearing this.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll hear, it's like that they're not, you're hearing that because that's been our experience, where they don't realize we can speak Spanish. Now there's 2 officers on our department that speak fluently, myself, and then we have Officer Martin. I'm not as likely to probably at 2 a.m. be at that burglary in progress, but I could be. Otherwise, it could be Officer Martin. Or now we have digital cameras. We have body cameras that we have on. In a case, by the way, they're excellent. So in a case like that, if they're like, I don't know what they were saying here, we can very easily have an interpreter review that. So that would be another example that just comes to mind. It's like, at the time I couldn't speak Spanish, for example, but I overheard this. Just from their body language, I believe that there was maybe something else going on. And then we'll take it to an interpreter, and they might say, yeah, we're maybe giving somewhat of a confession right on our camera. And then that would be, including that footage, would be shared with ICE. Now, we haven't had that happen firsthand yet, but I mean, that potentially could. If that scenario would play out like that, that would be our procedure.
And even if it was done with an officer who doesn't speak Spanish, let's say, they can, I don't believe that they should be able to be considered suspect because they're speaking with their significant other or whomever in Spanish. That shouldn't be suspect in and of itself.
No, but it's usually body language that goes along with that. There's something that's the officer's considering suspicious. And, when they always talk about reasonable suspicion, probable cause, you kind of know it when you see it. It's certainly something as far as due process. If we have a case where we're going to court, we're going to be questioned on that. Mm-hmm. How did you arrive at, what you considered probable cause?
Chief, if I can just jump in, and that was going to kind of be my follow-up. Now, in that scenario where you get a translator, now, are you thinking that that's under the umbrella of the ongoing criminal investigation, or a possible immigration issue?
Could be criminal, yeah. I mean, that's what we're generally investigating as anything criminal. I mean, I'll give you an example, someone I know firsthand. Very, very same scenario. Where they had a traffic stop, and they're like, the officer was out on the highway doing a traffic stop, and stuff just didn't smell right. Like it, you know, it's like one of those things you can try to describe it all day up here, you know, when we're all, you know, comfortable, air conditioned, all that kind of stuff. But again, there in that, you know, 11:30, 12 at night, things just didn't add up. And the officer back then didn't have a body camera on, but it was still back in the day where they had cassette recorders. Hit a cassette recorder. So he's recording. And again, things weren't adding up. The officer, in that case, one of the individuals ended up fleeing on foot. But like when they were talking back and forth, like with some of them, they thought there was something going on, possibly undocumented, possibly some type of threat or something like that, because he felt very uneasy. Another backup officer showed up. State trooper showed up, and then, you know, it seemed like seconds later, here comes, you know, the lights, there's another one. And ultimately, the situation was resolved relatively soon. But in that case, when they took it to the interpreter, it said, you get behind them, and let's trip them. You know, they're saying this in Spanish, and then I'll grab his gun. That was literally what was said. So, I mean, in a case like that, then the officer he didn't know Spanish, but he could read the situation, and he knew it was getting, because he was about this close to just getting in a squad car and backing up and then just trying to monitor, because he was concerned, you know, if they had weapons, and it turned out they did. And it was turned out that, you know, again, this is from the interpretation. Now, the one individual, I can't remember. I think they only had the person that they had in custody. The other individual managed to escape. But like there was an example. So I mean, that's something we're going to use our resources that we have available, and we're going to interpret that. Especially, but you know, if you have like, you know, I can think of another scenario where you have some mom talking with a child or something, you know, it's like it's not suspicious. It's just they're trying to calm down the child because dad's being taken away for whatever reason, some type of crime that we're investigating, or vice versa. In a case like that we wouldn't be utilizing those resources. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
I have one. Isn't providing false information to a police officer a criminal offense?
It is.
So when I say that, if I was the one to present the fake ID or whatever it was that I was using to kind of conceal that I was a undocumented immigrant, you'd be able to hold that person for...
I wouldn't feel comfortable with it, because if we can in our mind reasonably, we're convinced that this person just gave us false ID. A lot of times it's because they'll even just share that with us. It's like literally during that encounter. But like, for example, it's very clear that if the practice is, if we have a false document that we believe is a false document. Now this isn't something that, as far as the training, that goes back 2 years ago, you know, because, you know, recently where this is coming up a lot. I'm talking about even 25 years ago. It's like, we're no experts at documents. And I mean, I've seen some that are very botched. This day and age, they're much better quality. But I've seen it where, you know, it's just like, you know, a third grader could have probably made that ID. However, we're not qualified as local agents, local officers to take that. We're just not. So as far as that arrestable offense, that's something where, as far as that crime that we'd be investigating, it is a crime, but that's something we'd be going we consider long-form complaint. To the best of our ability, we're going to try to be able to find this individual to the best of our ability, try to find an address, current address, that kind of thing. But then we're going, you know, again, long-form complaint is basically the report, a routing report, and it goes to a county or city attorney, depending what jurisdiction, if it's a felony or a misdemeanor. In that case, it would be going to the city attorney because it'd be a misdemeanor. As far as taking someone into custody, again, so if that answers your question, so no, we wouldn't, even though we believe that this is a false document. Again, we're not qualified, and we recognize that. Officers don't like to be told that they're not qualified, but they're not qualified to take that because they're not some type of document expert. So no, we would not. Now a federal agent can. I mean, they are allowed. So I never seen that, but if I had a federal agent walking with me, or if I had someone, I could certainly reasonably detain this person for 10 minutes or something like that, something reasonable if there's a federal agent that was in the area, but I've never seen that scenario happen. But they could. But again, now that would be that federal agency. You know, we wouldn't be getting involved in that other than we would back them up and that kind of thing.
So let's say somebody was driving a vehicle and got pulled over and presented a false identification, like a driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And you suspected, you know, they're undocumented. Could you then bring them in?
Probably. If they're driving the vehicle, and I mean, there's other ways we can identify them. We can be calling in their name and date of birth. NCIC would be, you know, they'd be running the stuff through, and they would be able to determine at that point, because if we can't, at some point, if we can't identify who this person is, they're giving maybe a false name of someone else. And it, you know, those kind of things. So I mean, under that, we would have probable cause to take the person in custody. As far as taking someone into custody, you know, just a real quick refresher. I can take, if I have probable cause as a peace officer, I can take someone into custody for a felony. So I don't have to witness it. I can just say, the mayor could say, I just saw someone, he pulled a gun, and he threatened this individual, and then he hit him inside the head and ran away, or something like that. And the individual is sitting right over there. Now, I would be able to, as a peace officer, gather the information to the best of my ability, take the person into custody, because I believe the mayor, I at least have probable cause to take the person into custody, but we're talking about a felony. Now, if it's a misdemeanor, I have to witness it. The peace officer actually has to witness it. So I can take someone into custody for a misdemeanor, but again, very clearly, the peace officer has to witness it. Now, where it sometimes comes up too, another example is if another peace officer, if I can verify that the other peace officer witnessed it, you know, so I have Officer Martin that happened to witness it. She walked away. She didn't know anything was going on, and you know, later, or she witnesses it, doesn't realize it's a crime. That sometimes happens. You know, at the time he didn't realize what encounter, but then later on it's like, no, I did witness it. That is exactly how it happened. I can take, that gets a little more complicated, but I can take the person into custody off the other officer's observation. It happens a lot of times, like in bar fights. You know, something that's pretty, I won't say usual, but it certainly has happened. It happens historically, and it certainly happens now. So if someone is, like, let's say in Lafayette, and they're in a bar or something like that, there's a bar fight, and the officer witnesses it, but one person got away. This individual, I'm by myself, I can only deal with one person at a time. This individual gets away, and now we have an encounter with the individual in New Ulm, or they're saying, please look out for this person. I think it's Joel Schmoll out of such and such. You know, we be able to figure out the address, or somehow we come across the individual. I can take the person into custody at that point from the other officer's observations. But we're very careful. We make sure that we have the right person, because again, there's quite a bit at stake. Because they're taking someone in custody. In law enforcement, I mean, we take that pretty serious. If we're actually taking them into custody, that's a much higher level than if we're routing a report. Because then, routing a report, we have a prosecutor verifying the probable cause and doing a formal complaint, and then usually there's an arrest warrant. That's a whole different issue. If you're taking someone into custody because there's an arrest warrant involved, I mean, then you have a court order. You will take the person into custody, period. But when we're the ones determining it, we're careful. And we're trained well, but we're careful and we take it serious.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 4, the HRC financial report. Has everybody had a chance to look at it? Looks like there's quite a bit left on there this year. Looks like we have 84% that we've used. There's 84% still remaining.
Looks like it. Well, it's just, we haven't ordered more signs yet this year. That's why there's so much there. And we have our poster essay like everything is left, coming up. I think all of our money's spent at the last half of the year.
Fall.
Yep.
Well, late summer, fall, I guess. As far as the signs go, I know I have a bundle. Does anybody else have signs?
I still have some.
Okay. You got rid of yours?
Yeah, Wendy and I consolidated ours, and I gave them to you yesterday, so whatever you have includes mine.
We got the fair coming up.
Yeah.
And National Night Out. So after that, maybe we should look into ordering more. We'll see how many go, because the fair stand or the fair booth is usually the place that they leave the quickest.
Do we need more
Mhm.
before the fair?
I don't know.
How many would you say you have? You said a bundle, like was it
Yeah, I got
25?
quite a few. It's still in my garage.
Okay.
Or maybe we just hold out until next year and maybe design something new.
The designs of these signs are specifically from a how do I-
National.
Yeah, it's a national thing that I got permission to add the German on instead of there was another language, just to kind of keep it local. That's why it's that way. I mean, I have no problems with looking at designing something different, but it was kind of keeping with the national, I guess.
Well, there's 14 more signs out there after the parade
Right.
too, which is nice to know.
I worry that after National Night Out and the fair, if we don't order more, we're just gonna be done. I think the fair booth, usually, anything that we bring is gone.
Yeah.
So
And
how,
I'm not sure how National Night Out went last year, if we had a lot of them go out or not.
I don't.
I don't
I
remember.
don't think so. Not like
No.
the parade or the fair.
It
Wait,
wouldn't
but did we
surprise
have
me
them
if
for Night
50
Out?
went at the fair if we had them.
I don't think we had 'em at Night Out.
Getting 'em.
yeah, I don't think we had them there last year,
So, yeah.
which would be why we didn't give any out.
And we have to,
What,
we need
National
to
Night
use the
Out?
budget or
Yeah.
else we
Yeah.
can't get more.
I feel like I,
think we had them
remember.
on display, but I don't, did we?
I feel like I remember them being under the table, but
I think they were
Were
there.
they?
I
Okay.
think they were there under the table, but not many were handed out.
All right.
If
Should
I,
we?
if I could ask, what's the fiscal year for the budget?
It's annual or January to January, isn't
okay.
it?
Yeah, and that comes to 4.2, the budget request. I need to get that sent. I will send that to Lisa.
Well, would that be for 2020?
Yeah, can everyone pull that up real quick? I just need to get some advice as to anything that looks like we could increase, or should we stay with 8750?
Did they grant the full request from last year?
Yeah, the 8750 is.
Okay.
We had talked about doing more speakers, like one for the Human Rights Commission Award or the Human Rights Award.
Yeah.
We wanted to get into more, I don't know, doing more city functions.
Do we want to increase the speakers?
Do we have that full 8750 spoken for, or at least a majority of it? Because we don't want to try and add money if we don't know how we're going to spend the current money.
Well, currently, wouldn't we need to, or we could eliminate the video contest prizes, because are we about done with that? We've tried, I think, everything we
Mhm.
could, and we really haven't had a response. So that would be $1,200.
Do we want to move that to the program expenses, speakers?
Yeah, the awards dinner or award ceremony.
And we talked about sponsoring education night, kind of having a speaker in the community come in. I know a couple years ago, wasn't there a joint thing done, Jackie? Maybe you were involved with on bullying. Was that a while back?
I did the sex trafficking.
Okay, all right. Speaker, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think maybe if we're gonna look into working along with Minnesota Forward, then we might be able to come up with something there as a either
You mean
joint.
New Ulm Forward?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Would that be part of that bundle then?
Mhm.
Okay. And then as far as requesting the budget, will you just send it off to Lisa?
Yeah, isn't it supposed to be done by the end of June?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I thought maybe it was already done and we were already
Should I put
talking
that in
about
the
next year.
And
No.
my face is red probably.
I
It's not
apologize.
I'll note that on here.
My bad. My face is red?
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on. Let's move on.
So, but do you have,
Yeah,
but
do
in
we-
looking in here, we don't, so the signs are up in the 1,500, and that's
So
enough
we
for that,
get
okay.
100 per 500 spent, so there's 300 signs there.
Okay, okay.
Like I said, I have a bundle. You know how they're wrapped in a
Mhm.
bundle. I have
So I
at
think
least
that's
one
it.
of those for
And that's 25.
the events that are coming up.
Okay, but I'm wondering, getting back to if we need more, so you have 25 plus just what Dan and I had together? So that's not a whole lot for the
Mm-mm.
fair.
That's
You know, I
probably
just wonder if
about-
we wanna order more before then.
Probably 40 total.
Yeah, but I think we
That's-
need to order more.
That's what
Yeah.
Chad.
I have about 6 to 8 of them left.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is that
So-
something that we can get?
yeah
done?
it's Printware Graphics down on South Broadway. So I'll just get a hold of Mike there, and he just prints them off and sends the invoice to the city.
1,000 of them? I mean, 100.
Whoa.
I don't think
your
we have
budget
that
I
in
like-
the budget.
I like your optimism,
I
I
though.
think your face is red now. So,
100, right? That's what we have done in the past.
Yeah.
that's where we get a
A
significant
certain
discount.
discount with.
Yep.
So I think
Yep.
100 of 'em.
Okay.
I'll email him tomorrow.
All right. Anything else for number 4?
So we're basically gonna request the same amount from last year.
Yes.
for the
I
budget.
think
Okay,
that's a
great.
good
Yep.
idea.
And then I'll
And
move,
we
like I
just might
said.
move.
Yep, we'll
Yeah,
move
okay.
Just
the
gonna
video contest.
reapportion some of the amount, okay.
All right, events committee number 5, the Bavarian Blast Parade. Myself and Dan and Chad were part of that yesterday. It was definitely a success. I'm glad it was a little bit cooler than it was on Friday because that would not have been fun. Handed out a lot of signs, handed out a lot of stickers and bookmarks.
Awesome.
I think we're still good on the stickers and the bookmarks for the other things that are coming up.
A ton of them.
Yeah, you got 2 packs of stickers. I didn't get any
Like
of those.
500
So.
or more than that for bookmarks. We have
Yeah.
A lot of bookmarks.
Yeah, and we got the business cards too. So I think we definitely have enough for the next 2 events coming up. As far as 5.2 National Night Out, I don't think I was part of that last year. What's the plan? Are we gonna have a booth at the community center? Is that what we did last year?
It was
We
at
did
German
German
Park.
German
German
Park,
Park.
yeah.
We were with another organization,
We
another part
partnered
we
with-
shared.
Yeah, with New Ulm Forward,
Oh,
and we shared booth space with them.
Are you guys doing that this year in New Ulm Forward or?
I haven't been at the last 2 meetings. Vacation,
That's okay.
so.
This
I'm
is
not sure.
how we've now just started planning for next Monday.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think
So we run into
anybody's
trouble
really
when
talked
when
about
we
it.
missed the June meeting.
When
We
yeah,
weren't here last
June
month,
was supposed
yeah.
to be when we put all of this
That's
together.
right.
So are we gonna skip it this
Well,
year?
We would just need to find out if there's space available, and then we really have all the stuff.
Hmm
So,
It's just another fair booth type
right?
event. So who worked last year with
Is that you?
Metaphor?
I was just
Or
saying,
New Ulm Forward.
well, Police department probably.
Mr. President, we would have, I mean, there's space available regardless, so if
Okay.
you wanna be involved with that, certainly
Do we have to provide our own table?
you do.
Yeah,
I have a table.
okay.
And, you know, if you could bring the chairs and stuff, we try to have, as much shelter available, we bought some additional stuff, as far as tents and things like that.
Mhm.
But, you know, we have extra tables, but they run out fast because
Yeah.
a lot of times we have someone who just forgot or they didn't get the memo or something.
I have tables too. For
And
them.
I have an awning, if any,
Do you?
I'll bring
That would
it,
be great.
Yeah, that's big.
or I'll drop it off, depends on the day.
We should probably get an idea of who will be able to be there. I mean, I'm
What is the-
thinking, how long is it, and if it's, do we know what the hours, Chief, do you know what the hours of that are?
The start is 5:30.
Okay,
We encourage, you know, if people can set up, they can set up anytime they want to, but generally, around 5:15, people set up, and then 5:30 it formally starts.
okay. What time what time does it end? It's, okay,
8:30.
Yep. okay. The reason I'm asking is maybe we wanna do like an hour and a half, 2 people, and then if they wanna shift or change out, then that would be fine, but first we just gotta get an idea
I
of
can help
who
set
will
up.
all be there.
I can't stay the whole time, but I'd be happy to help set up.
Ditto. So I will help set up with Jackie.
Awesome.
And I can be there.
I can be there for like an hour and a half, like the first hour and a half.
Okay. I don't know yet.
Yeah, I don't either.
No, we have a neighborhood get-together that I've committed to already.
Okay.
I put my kids to work last year too. Like we had
Yeah.
activities and stuff, so I can
Chairs.
employ them too.
Chairs too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We brought our own like little canvas chairs
Okay.
last
Okay.
time, and
Who has chairs then?
I do. I have a couple I can, at the very least, send those along. I should be able to be there, but I guess I gotta double check, and so I'll email. Does somebody want to be like a point of contact as far as who will be there and when?
I'll set that up.
Okay.
And then we'll need to grab the, tablecloth and the sign or the banner, everything we'd have for
Yeah, I
the
have
Burglary.
everything.
Awesome.
Do you need the posters? Because I still have them.
No, probably for,
You have the posters? I have the posters.
Oh, I have something. I have some things.
Okay.
Those will
I
be
have
for
the
the-
posters from this year.
For the
Mine are
fair,
probably
right?
from the year before.
Oh, are you thinking the contest posters?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have this year's.
So we
I
probably
think
use
there
the
was a
most
lot of
current.
them,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
So
okay.
maybe we'll use those more at the fair than
Sounds
the
good.
night.
I'll just
Okay.
hold on to
I'll
them.
just hang on to them.
I'd say just the table stuff.
Yeah, when we're
and-
outside, I don't
yeah.
want to risk if there's any kind of
Right.
weather or anything, get those getting wrecked.
All right, so we'll move on to 5.3, the Brown County Fair. I know that in the past we've gotten a calendar, and I have not seen that come out yet from Lisa. I assume she's the one that sends out the schedule.
That was me. That I sent out the scheduling.
Where you put your name on it?
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
yeah.
I can take Sunday, tear down.
I'll do it too. We can.
We're
tag
pretty
team
good at that, Dee and I know how that one works.
Tear downers.
Okay.
So
Are
you're
you
gonna
gonna-
still put out a sign-up schedule?
Yeah.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, could you still circulate
Yep.
that, just so we can see
Please don't
who's-
reply to me. Let Tim know.
Yep.
It was what kind of document was it?
An
Like
Excel
spreadsheets.
document.
Oh.
I'll put it in Google Drive.
Yeah.
That way it self-updates.
Yeah, you can send that out via email then.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool. Yeah, that is coming up fast. What, 3 weeks?
Not even.
Less than 3 weeks?
What are the dates on that?
August 7th through the 11th.
Okay.
Setup is on the 7th,
Yeah, what is that, a Wednesday night?
Wednesday night?
Yes.
I'll be part of the setup.
We have
So I
to
have
get
all
there
this
early
stuff.
for cheese curds this
I
year.
know.
Then I'll have to get
Yeah,
I'll
always
get
run
posters
out.
to you, but I might be able to come too.
Okay.
It depends on my work at Shell.
I think it starts at like 5:30 or something.
Yeah, so
5 or
before that.
5:30.
So maybe
But-
you and I can coordinate on.
Yeah, we'll look at
Okay.
the schedule that Jackie sends out.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Education Committee, number 6. Does that have anything to talk about? Think we have anything right now?
No.
All right, we'll move on. The legislative update, number 8. I do not have anything. Anyone else?
No.
Mm-mm.
Number 9, City Council Liaison. I know we talked about that at the
That
beginning.
one, that ball kind of got
Jackie.
dropped.
Is the current liaison, at least for one more month,
Yep.
because
All those months that I did it before.
May, June, July, right?
I think I did up until now.
Oh, okay.
Yesterday, I mean last month.
Oh, so June, we didn't have a meeting in June, so.
I'm gonna take credit for that though.
All right, then. Jackie, June, July, August, and September. How's that?
Okay.
Three
July,
months.
okay.
3-month terms, July, August, September. All right, move on to number 10, other business. The panel on race, Mankato Area Diversity Council. Wendy, is that something that?
Yeah, that's another, it's kind of on hold. I'm not exactly sure where that's going with, as far as you're talking about partnering with the Minnesota, or the New Ulm Forward,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, I guess I'm not sure exactly where they're at with that. But
Okay.
it's still in the works, and they still are wanting to partner with us, whether it be with the panel on race or other ventures in town. They want to be connected with us.
Let's table that until August. Then
So
we'll talk
you're
about it.
involved with New Ulm Forward, correct?
Yes.
So there's our built-in liaison. We don't
There we
have
go.
to- appoint somebody, so.
Thanks for volunteering, Wendy.
All right, I'll be back.
When
At the
when do
fair-
they meet?
It's, we don't have set meetings.
Oh, okay.
And it just has happened to be where, honestly, I've been out of town every single time. and
Sure.
We don't even go that many places, so.
Yep.
Do you think
I'll
we
do
should-
better when school starts.
Sorry.
That's how it goes.
Should we pose a question at the fair booth or at National Night Out about what the community may want to see as speakers that they find
Yeah.
interesting?
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think, or anything else we can think of at the fair. We did a survey through what was at our booth, because we shared a booth for the night out last year, where we just asked questions about what their people's experience was in town. You know, how do you feel, where you feel New Ulm sits. We gave like a spectrum of, you know, 1 to 10, where, you know, where are we at with diversity, where are we at with how welcomed you feel here, that sort of thing, and then narratives, and it was really interesting. And that information just went to the New Ulm Forward. But if we want to do anything like that, if there's things we really want to know to see maybe what the needs are in this town, or what, maybe where we can do some good, we could think of some, you know, some specific questions that.
Put it out there and just
Yeah.
see what we get back. 'Cause
But it was very interesting.
We
and-
did get surveys that said New Ulm was already too diverse,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's good for us to know, so people think that. So where is that?
Where do we
put
go
us
from
and what do
there?
we do from
I
there?
agree.
So maybe, I don't know, is that something maybe the education committee, or we can maybe just get together before? I mean, we'll have to figure it out right now, but just maybe think of some good questions if you have them, or things you feel we want to know, maybe email
Yeah.
us.
There might be some stuff available out there on civic consciousness kind of surveys that you can access online.
Well, it seems like you might know where those are found. Would you
Yeah,
like
I
to
might.
Yep,
find
Larry
some of those
volunteered.
for
I'll
us?
try and, email me, I'll try and get you some of those.
I'm also wondering if contacting the Mankato Area Diversity Council, maybe they have something as well for just kind of doing like a dipstick, you know, just to see where the community's at with what they're thinking.
Is Bukai still
Yeah,
involved with that?
yeah.
Okay.
I can check with him if you'd
Yeah,
like.
he might have some stuff.
Okay.
Be curious to see what we get back. All right. Any other questions or comments? I think the date for our next meeting is August 26, 2019.
First day of school.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? You can stay. Passes.